Testing.
Maybe.
Good morning, everyone. We will start off today's meeting with a karakia. E tu atua, manakina mai, matu mahi, manakina mai, matu hui, manakina mai, matu korero. Ameni. And the translation for that is Divine One, bless our work, bless our meeting, and bless our discussion. Amen. Please be seated. Welcome everyone to the April Council meeting. April? Yes, we are still in April. Great to see councillors, staff, members of the public and also the media here today. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here. Apologies, looks like everybody's here today. Thank you very much, councillors. Public forum, we have none other than James Cagle from NZTA will be presenting at a workshop following this meeting. Any conflicts of interest? We will save the conflicts of interest for the appeals to the end, but if you have ones for the public session, there's none for the public session? Okay, there appears to be none. We'll circle back to the conflicts of interest before the appeals piece. 5.1 is the unconfirmed minutes of the council meeting on the 17th of March 2026. Do we have any questions on those minutes? All happy? I will move. Could I look for a move that those are a true and correct record? Councillor Gardine, seconded by Councillor Fraser. If there is no discussion, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against, that motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Don't see the confirmation of an agenda here, but we're all happy with the agenda. Cool. I just thought I'd note here that Councillor Coates, as the portfolio holder for community, will be doing 7.1, which is the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme, and 7.2, which is the pre-engagement. And if I forget, she's going to give me a good nod to make sure that I hand that over. Moving on to 6.1, which is the October 2025 wind event report. Craig, welcome on up. Thank you. Did you want to speak to this report at all?
Funding we got back from NZTA and MFV from the Emergency Waste Fund after the October wind event.
Thank you, Craig. Questions? Councillor Fraser.
Gone now, right. Through your worship, thank you, Craig, for this report. Just a couple of questions I have is, if continuing on, because I understand there's some trees that are damaged, still damaged around our district, can we go back to the emergency fund?
Potentially we can go back. There are a few qualifications though, and they are in the report. One is making sure that managing that waste is reasonably necessary to address a public health risk or the environment, and that it's beyond our resources to clean that up. So we have to qualify that, and we could do that during the emergency, very much harder as you move further and further away from it. And as you're aware, there's been a number of events around the country, and that the fund is not inexhaustible, as I understand it. So we have those challenges.
Thank you for that. And going forward from that, I know that we've got clean-up still continuing on, and I look at, say, the Avery, that doesn't fall under that, does that?
The Avery tree came down outside of the emergency event, so going back to that, and it was quite some time after, so it may be challenging to get that into this funding.
Thank you, Councillor. Nice try on that one. Councillor Cupid.
Yeah, my question's around the Merrill Relief Fund, the funding that was received for Southland for that. Did any of that go back to the Gore community, do we know?
That is a question for Emergency Management Southland, who administer that fund. Yep.
I can provide a bit of insight to that. They haven't quite done all of the tallying up as to where those invoices went. I know that the From memory, the community gardens did an application, and there was another one done on behalf of a gentleman that had a tree fall into his place. So some of the cleanup was funded for that as well too. So there wasn't too much here, much more in both Invercargill and Southland. But I will come back with a detailed report once it's all finalised. Councillor Coates.
Thank you, through your worship. Craig, it says in the report that it identifies areas where we could make some improvements. Can you just clarify what areas those are, please?
Sure, a lot of that is around resilience, you know, understanding how we communicate with each other when we have a comms outage, how we talk to staff during that period, you know, making sure our staff are safe. So there's just processes we're putting in place to make sure that we are better the next time an event happens and we lose communications, and we're really good with our power and stuff. You know, we could continue on. Our connection with Emergency Management Southland was good, but there were some processes that fell over during that we have worked with them to make sure that they're better next time around.
Sorry, and just following on from that, I recall that a large portion of the trees in the district were scanned. Has that proven to be a useful tool that was done by the council?
I'm sure it is. I don't have any data on any of that, though. It will certainly allow us to understand where we have gaps in those trees in a similar event in the future, I'm sure.
Councillor Stringer.
Through your worship, thanks, Craig. So the NZTA have obviously put money towards this. Those trees that came down, we obviously chipped them and they've gone back into our own resource piles that we'll then use in our own gardens. So effectively they've helped pay for the mulching of our gardens.
At this stage, a lot of those logs are still whole. They haven't been chipped yet because the contractor we used was also very busy doing other stuff during that event as well. So we haven't caught up yet. So we still have two major chip piles at both the Gore and Matoda transfer stations that have to be done yet.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Appear to be none. Can I have a move that we receive this report? Councillor Fraser, seconded by Councillor Phillips. Any discussion? Yeah, Councillor Fraser and then Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Worship. Hey, Craig, just to the whole team, it was well handled. Very happy that we will be able to get some of that money anyway, and just pass on our congratulations for basically getting it done.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips, seconding that, and I will third that as well. Yeah, very well done to the team. When I look at some of the bills that neighbours will have to face, it's quite daunting, and then to see that we get, you know, away for it from a council perspective relatively unscathed is pretty incredible. So very well done to the team, and to all of us for being so prepared during that emergency. Councillor McDonald.
Just one thing further, we will get a further report, I believe, from Lorne on what our internal costs were when we've accumulated all that, because we have internal costs of the gardens and stuff that we've brought into our, or costs that we've taken on board cleaning up the messes around the gardens and things, and just when we get a report on that.
I think those are contained within this report. Is that correct, Lorna?
Through your worship, the internal cost for staffing was around about 24,000. That has been, we've included that where we can to get funding back on, but not all of it will be able to be recouped.
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? Appears to be none. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. Moving on to 6.2, thank you, Craig, which is the resolution to receive all reports for information. So as people remember from the last council meeting, this is something that we have instituted this term to try and speed up meetings a little bit, so that we can get into the meatier stuff. Councillors are all welcome to pull these reports out. They just let me or the team know. But if there's no questions, it's something that the public can engage in, can read, can talk to councillors about, but doesn't need to slow us down in the council meeting. So those this month are the mayoral reports, the updates on government reforms, the Matoda River Crossing and Interconnecting Pipeline Project final report, the update on the Muriwai Centre project, financial report for 28 February 2026, Mirahuku Regional Spatial Plan and the Local Government Waste Policy Manifesto. Commentary is welcome. Questions we don't need to do, hopefully. Can I please have a mover that received those reports? Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Stringer. Any discussion? Giselle, did you want to speak, give us a bit of an update on risk and insurance? Giselle is sorry, I'll just introduce you, Giselle, because some people might not know. Giselle is our independent risk and insurance chair, and we're very lucky to have you. Giselle, take it away.
Kia ora. Thank you, Your Worship. Kia ora to those of you who are members of the public in the room. I don't have any visibility of you, of course, but just acknowledging we're in a public meeting. And on behalf of the committee, I'm really happy to give you a verbal update on the committee's work. So I guess the headline is we had a committee workshop, which was on the 9th of March, and that really focused on 4 topics. If I just run through them briefly. The first one was our expectations of the committee and of management. So just working through what everybody was expecting us to focus on. And I'll just summarise those things for you. So it was a learning environment so we can all contribute and be effective. We're really working on both risk and assurance. I'll come to both of those. And helping to set risk appetite. And then fundamentally trying to do what we can to balance the need to make rates affordable in the short term and to help council invest for the long term. And that came up, that theme of the balance was again and again. So once we'd had set those expectations, we then moved into a morning on risk. And that was setting risk appetite, doing some formal work around the policies and the framework we're going to use, and a big focus on strategic risk. Obviously, operational risk is the purview of the CEO. So this committee is here to look at the strategic risks. And we definitely challenged each other and ourselves on what we see as what's strategic and what's not. And we had a bit of a discussion around the difference between a risk, something that it hasn't happened, or an issue, something that is already being managed by obviously the council or the CEO as appropriate. So I think it was a challenging conversation, but really constructive. We then and spent some time on really understanding how Gore District Council is unique, how it's different to other councils, and how we can't just take what's happening in one part of the country and think, well, that automatically applies in our environment. So that was really useful. The second big chunky topic was the assurance process of the committee, and that's our oversight and looking at controls and checking, and particularly the financial audit that will be coming up. So we did some planning for that as well, and looked at compliance, maybe a new way of thinking about how do we do the right things at the right time and the right way. And I know the team have been very busy focusing on that too. And then the final chunky topic was our work plan for the committee and what we'll be doing over the next few months, particularly as we get the committee efficient and effective. So all of that was then giving some direction to management of what we need from them in preparation for our first meeting, which is next Tuesday, 10 a.m, a public meeting. And we'll be bringing all of that information forward for formal consideration and approval by the committee. And then, of course, because we're a committee of council, we make recommendations to the council itself. So that's what we'll be meeting to do. And then our next meeting, if anybody is interested, is the next public meeting is the 16th of June. So next Tuesday, 28th of April, and then the 16th of June. I want to thank Tyrone, who is the Deputy Chair, for in this environment. Maybe Councillor Smith would have been better, of the committee, and is acting in that portfolio lead with the liaison, because of course as an independent chair I'm not in all of the council meetings, so he's taking the load for that. Thank you very much. That's all I was going to cover. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Giselle? Thank you, Giselle, or Councillor Smith?
Welcome.
Lovely. Thank you very much. We'll move back into commentary. I'll kick us off. Just wanted to say again, a huge thank you, congratulations, and all of the other words to celebrate the Mataura River Crossing project. What started off as an incredibly risky project with a lot of community engagement about what we should do there has turned out into a great success. And now to know that we have UV treated water on both sides of the Mataura River is really comforting from my position as an elected member. And just want to thank the community for their engagement, the staff for their hard work, and councillors for their foresight in that project. Any other commentary on the reports that we have? Councillor Cupid?
Yeah, just on the regional spatial plan. So my research tells me that that will eventually replace the district plan, and will the work that we've already put into the district plan be transferable into this spatial plan? And then once I know that it's just at the start of the process now, but once that does get fully developed, there will be community consultation as there normally would.
Yeah, so I can help answer that. That's all good. No, I think it's all good. So the regional spatial plan won't replace the district plan, but it will replace the spatial plan. And so we'll have a regionalised one. Having done our spatial plan and district plan beforehand, that positions us really well to slip into that regional. We're not trying to catch up and then go into regional spatial plan. We're up to date with what's coming forward. So we should be in an advantageous position moving forward into that spatial plan. It is probably fair to say that once you've got a regional spatial plan, government might move into regional district planning as well, but that isn't the case at this stage. Cool. Councillor Stringer?
Yeah, through you, Worship. 6.4 update on government reforms. Do the staff need any input from us on any current reforms that are open and need submissions on?
They would come to us with a report if they would need that. Any further discussion on those reports? Councillor McDonald?
There's one thing, the Mataura River Crossing project was an excellent project, and well done to staff and and councillors. Went up and saw how it worked up in Canterbury, and that, but we had a large contingency left over, and it concerns me that this contingency was used up by extending the project by putting the pipeline up towards Hillborough Avenue, but there was no consultation with councillors about using up this reasonably large contingency. So I'm just making a point that in future the council staff should come back to the councillors and ask if they've got a big contingency, hundreds of thousands to spend on something, that they should refer back. Don't just extend the project to use up the contingency. Just a comment.
Yeah, it is budgeted for, but I think that's noted. Yeah. Jason, do you want to comment?
Yeah, through your worship, I think it's important to note that with these projects, that if you have to come back to council, and that's why we build in a level of contingency to planning, because every time you have to come back to council, you stop the project. And so there's not, although that may seem like a straightforward process, it isn't, and the delay then can potentially cost more. So I mean, we absolutely will take on board, and we maybe need to think about how we build what's appropriate to be used for contingencies into some of these projects if we can, but we've got to sort of try and find that balance between enabling the project to proceed and deliver on the budget, and that is the budget. Contingency is part of that budget. Otherwise, you are going to constantly have overspends and delays. So it's just an important piece that we should note going forward.
Thank you for that, Jason. I think that's something we can probably figure out internally with portfolio leads and things. They could probably be given a heads up, and then a decision can be made around whether that needs to fully come back to council to slow down the project or not. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just noted there was some really great photos in that report, and I'm just wondering if we could share those with our ratepayers, because that photograph of the drill head alone, that's a great photo, and just gives it the scale of the size of the project itself. So.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. That's all public, but I'm sure Graham will do a Facebook post or something similar. Yeah. Any other commentary? I'll look that though for a mover that we receive those reports. Councillor Paul McPhail, seconded by Councillor Smith. I didn't already do that, did I? I did already do that. Yeah, I thought I did as I was doing it. Who are the mover and the seconder for that? Councillor Smith and Councillor Stringer had already moved and seconded that, so I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against, that is carried. Thank you very much, councillors. Moving on to reports for decision, and I will hand over to Councillor Coates. Giselle, you're welcome to sign off. You're welcome to stay if you want to. Completely up to you. Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a wee question. Have we got Hugo?
They were sent the invite, but I did tell them 10:30. So did we want to jump down to 7.2 and let them join? Yeah. I'll pass over to Debbie to update on the 7.2.
Good morning, councillors. So you will all be aware that we are currently working on our strategic framework for the long-term plan. So most of you participated in a workshop on the 10th of March where we made good progress on working through what our organisational values are, the vision, the purpose and some community outcomes. We obviously still have to finish that work, so we've got another week or two probably. We're still working collaboratively through that. What I am seeking from you today is a direction to prepare an engagement plan once we have finished that work, so that we can get moving as soon as we are done and get out to the community and seek their views. So the reason I'm coming to you is to seek that direction is because legally we aren't required to consult at this point, but my recommendation is that we bring our community on the journey and check in. The strategic framework is really important to get right because it underpins pretty much everything else that's in the long-term plan. So all of the activities and the service levels really need to drop down from the strategic framework. So if you don't have that in place early, it makes it very difficult to make decisions around service levels at a later date. So we intend to be workshopping with you in June on service levels and potentially some asset management information. Ideally, we would have a finalised strategic framework approved and ready to go by then. So we're just wanting to basically seek a direction from you today to prepare an engagement plan as soon as that material is ready and approved by you.
Thank you, Debbie. So I'd like to put a recommendation on the table that A, we receive and note the pre-engagement on the council vision and community outcomes for the 2027-23 long-term plan, and B, that the Chief Executive is to prepare alongside elected members an engagement strategy to seek community views on Council's agreed strategy, specifically the Council's vision and community outcomes. Can I have a mover? Oh, questions? Sorry. No questions? Can I get a mover? Thank you, Councillor Fraser, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor McPhail. All those in favour? Discussion? Sorry, discussion? Councillor Cupid?
Yeah, as long as we're clear with that, with what we're agreeing to, is that we're working on it at the workshop following this meeting. So, because we're kind of agreeing to something that we haven't properly discussed yet, is my concern.
Thank you, Councillor Cupid. Mebim?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think this is a great way to do things, actually engaging with the public around what strategic strategy and purpose should be to make sure that we get that agreement with them before we rush off and create this long-term plan. So definitely support this way and agree with Councillor Cupid if it's a little bit horse before the cart before the horse in the way that we're doing this, but I think that'll help us keep at a good pace.
Thank you. Any further? I'll put that motion on the floor. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? Motion carried.
Too quick on that one, councillors. I'll take it back from you if you don't mind, Councillor Coates, and we will do 7.3. And we can circle back to 7.1 when we have our guests join us. Dave, do you want to come up? You might be able to sit here for a while this time. Any updates on the proposal to adopt the GDC dangerous, affected and/or unsanitary buildings policy?
I guess just one comment for clarity for councillors. It says in the report that we had 3 submissions, only 2 of them are attached because one of them wasn't relevant. The not relevant one, I do have a copy of it here. Broadly, it's a neighbour complaining about their house next door with an overgrown garden and being a smelly house. So we chose not to include it.
Thank you for that one, Dave. Questions? Councillor Stringer?
Thank you, through you, Worship. Why is this in policy and not in district plan?
I think you've stumped me there. It's a policy we're required to have by MB. Every council is required to have a policy on dangerous, affected or unsanitary buildings. We already had such a policy, but some of the legislation changed, so MB required us to update the existing policy.
Thanks for that. So, okay, if MB asks us to set the policy, why is there something not set at a national level covering the whole country instead of every single district having its own little policy around it, just for efficiency?
Yeah, sorry, there was a whisper there of, because it's like everything we do. Every council is different, every district is different, so just taking into account the different feel of the district, the different types of buildings you may have and the different ways you may want to manage those different buildings. There are certain things you need to kind of tick in your policy, and we've now ticked all of those, but they do change from time to time.
I'll just add to that. It's not too dissimilar from national direction that we receive via our district plan or a legislative obligation to provide waste services or animal control. So it's just, most of what we do derives from a national direction of some sorts.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruce?
What are the gaps in the policy that HNZPT is talking about on page 1 of the Heritage New Zealand submission regarding best practice approaches? What are they talking about?
What's the point number you're referring to? Yeah, so they would like us to include reference to archaeological provisions, which we haven't done because we don't feel it's necessary for our district.
But they recommended that you should.
Yes. Heritage New Zealand, obviously, that's their focus. It's old heritage of old buildings, anything over 100 years old. They would like an archaeological assessment done before any work is done. We're not of the opinion that that's practical.
What would the cost of an archaeological assessment be, ballpark?
Well, in the low thousands, assume just to assess, and then depends if they find anything. But yeah, certainly some councils do have a provision that any building over 100 years old, you need to get an archaeological assessment done. But yeah, we don't really think that's practical for our district.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Stringer?
Thank you, Worship. Just a generic, what takes precedence, policy or plan?
I mean, I guess it depends on the scenario. This policy is specifically for what we do if, for example, there may be a landslip and we think a building may be dangerous now, how we respond to that. It's quite a reactive policy, really, on what happens if there's an earthquake or a landslip or some sort of event that creates a situation where we think a building may be dangerous and how we respond to that. It's not really a forward-looking planning piece.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Appear to be none. I will look for a mover that we receive the full set of submissions, note the 3 submissions, note the submitters do not want to be heard, and therefore there are no hearings that are necessary. Note the submissions do not have a material impact on the draft plan policy. Adopts the proposed dangerous and affected or unsanitary buildings policy, subject to any amendments, which there are none, and approves the Chief Executive to make any minor edits to the document to enact on the direction of Council. Councillor McDonnell is the mover, seconder. Councillor Phillips, any discussion? Thank you for undertaking that process, staff. Thank you for making changes after there was the communication faux pas at the beginning, giving people a bit of extra time to submit, and thank you to the submitters for taking the time to submit. If there is nothing further, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Now we will cycle back to 7.1, which is the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme. I'd like to welcome Hugo from Cameron Partners and Scott, who is the Chief Executive of Local Government New Zealand. Welcome to both of you. Hugo was with us yesterday. Some of us got to hear a really in-depth description of the Ratepayers Assistance Scheme, but they're here to answer any questions. Did you guys want to do a very quick synopsis of this scheme? Would either of you mind doing that just quickly for the members of the public and those who went there yesterday?
Yes, look, very happy to. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the invite this morning. I'm Scott Necklin, Chief Executive of Local Government New Zealand, and some of you would have met Hugo yesterday from Cameron Partners, who's the lead advisor on the Ratepayer Assistance Scheme. Look, very keen to get your support today, so very happy to take any questions, and I know some of you will have had questions for Hugo yesterday. Just very broadly, the Ratepayer Assistance Scheme is effectively a financing tool for ratepayers. It would provide really cost-effective financing for rate-like charges, and that spans things like rates postponement, development contributions, as well as impact loans, so things like solar installation, healthy homes, etc. So any type of property improvement loan that also has a public benefit. It effectively is modelled off the Local Government Funding Agency, which is a very successful initiative that saved close to $1 billion in interest for ratepayers since its inception, I think in 2011, and it effectively uses the strong credit rating that the RAS would secure because of its proximity to local government and central government. It would be off balance sheet for council, and then it would use that strong credit rating to pass on as much of the saving as possible to ratepayers. So that's just a very, very high level overview. Hugo, anything you want to add there? And very happy to take any questions.
The only thing I'd add to that is that the scheme is a national shared service, so it actually takes away the administration from local authorities as well. So lots of local authorities are providing these types of products already, but they're being replicated across 78 local authorities, where it can be done much more efficiently through a centralised vehicle, which is what the RAS would be.
And probably just to add in terms of where we're at, so we have completed a very comprehensive business case, which also kind of goes into the kind of design of the RAS. We set up a strategic advisory group to pull it apart and put it back together again. That was chaired by Nick Smith. It also had Stuart Henderson and Cameron Bagri on that strategic advisory group. They did that late last year and have written a letter to the Minister with their full support. And the business case is currently with officials and with the Minister. And so at the moment we are seeking in principle support from councils that they see benefit in the RAS and that they would enable their ratepayers to access the RAS. We've had to date about 8 funding councils, predominantly metros, and a couple of the larger provincial councils fund the business case development to this stage.
Thank you, gentlemen. I will pass over to Councillor Coates, who will lead the question.
Thank you, Hugo and Scott. Do any councillors have any questions? Councillor Bruce.
So just a question, 2 parts, I guess. Whose brainchild was the scheme? So where did it originate from? Is it LGNZ that's created this? Like where did it come from? This is my first part.
Hugo, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, it originally came from a discussion with Auckland Council. When we put together the LGFA, there were was what we called an establishment board, and Mark Butcher, who's now the chief executive of LGFA, was on that. Also another gentleman by the name of Matthew Walker, who moved on to become the CFO at Auckland Council. So we had that relationship from the LGFA, and the discussion started with Matthew, where he was looking to come up with a solution for the likelihood that rates postponement was going to become there would be much more demand for it, which would create, I guess, a lot more requirements for councils to process those applications and then also fund those applications on their balance sheet. So it was a discussion with Matthew, and it's evolved from there to the point where we came up with a solution for rates postponement on a national basis, which was going to be off balance sheet. And at that point, we realised that there was scope to use the RAS for other products like deferred DCs and impact loans. So it's been evolving over quite an extended period of time. LGNZ's been there from pretty much the start as well. It's been a really big supporter and enabled us and other advisors to access the sector, which is what we're effectively doing now.
And probably just to add, it's been, I guess, from that point when we first did the concept testing, it's been a collaboration with the local government funding agency, LGNZ, and a number of metro councils, with the likes of Cameron and Partners supporting that, as well as other key advisors, PwC, etc.
So you guys, who like the people creating this, they stand to make money out of it, don't you? You're not doing this for free. You make money out of this from the ratepayers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Pardon?
So it's a public benefit initiative. So LGNZ, we don't make any money out of this at all. We see this as a public benefit initiative, but very much modelled on the LGFA. So councils and the government are shareholders to LGFA. The idea is that obviously they use that leverage, the credit rating, and then they pass on the savings to councils. In this instance, the Ratepayer Assistance Scheme would be owned again by local authorities and partly owned by central government. Nobody can take more than a 20% shareholding. And then the idea is that as much of that interest rate would be as much of the saving would be passed on as possible. So we've modelled it'd be about 2% cheaper than a standard floating mortgage rate. I think at the point in time where the RAS breaks even, then it's up to the shareholders to decide at that point in time whether or not the shareholders get a return on investment or whether they potentially pass on even further saving to the, to the ratepayers. But ultimately, it's a public benefit, and ultimately, just as it is for the funding agency, the shareholders are the councils, and the councils will make that decision as the shareholders.
So this is really for the ratepayers, the ambulance at the bottom of the hill.
So I wouldn't see it that way. So I think the way to look at it is, say, for example, rates postponement. We have a number of, elderly people that are on fixed incomes. They are obviously in their communities. They've got connections with their family and their friends. They don't want to necessarily move out of their home. They're facing a number of cost increases across, groceries, insurance, electricity, etc. And so this provides a very cost-effective option. Their alternative might be a reverse mortgage, which would be 4 or 5% higher than a standard mortgage rate. So this obviously would be far more effective. Their other options are obviously to move, but that may not be palatable to them because then they're disconnecting from their communities. And there's increased evidence that obviously that disconnection can have a huge impact on people's well-being. So we just see this as an option, say, for example, those people that are on fixed incomes. For the likes of development contributions, this would provide cheaper financing to ratepayers. So ultimately, the purchase of a property will pay the cost of that property, and obviously that includes the development contribution. So if that development contribution, say, is $50,000, under current standard mortgage rates, they'd pay 5%, 5.5%. If the RAS was used to fund that development contribution, they'd pay a cheaper rate, so it'd be 3 or 3.5%. So they're actually making a saving on that as well. And then, for example, like the impact loans, we know one of the biggest barriers to the uptake of solar and the installation of solar panels, batteries, etc., is the financing cost. There are green loans available through some of the banks, but actually about 80% of the market is not able to access those. So this is, again, a way of which they could finance the installation of solar. It could also be expanded to, insulation, and there's a range of kind of public benefit property improvements that could be added to that over time. But again, it's the financing at 2% cheaper than standard mortgage rate, which actually makes it affordable. And the modelling that's been done is on an average installation of solar after repayments are made to the ratepayer assistance scheme at that cheap finance, that have an extra $1,000 on their saving on their power bill. So no, we don't see this as an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff at all. Just to probably note, I guess, that this doesn't, in the policy design, doesn't replace the rates rebate scheme.
And I guess just adding to that, Scott, I mean, one of the key features of the RAS is there's no compulsion to use the RAS. It's an option for ratepayers. So ratepayers can decide whether or not they want to use it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Can you just touch further on what we spoke about last night around the water charges and the availability of the RAS being used in the future for that? Because things are getting more expensive over time and we do have an ageing population.
Yeah, so what's outlined in the business case, it's a recommendation to government that if they are to approve this and to support the legislation, that it should be flexible enough to allow water entities to also make RAS products available to their customers. So it's and part of the driver for that is to maintain a level playing field. Some local authorities will set up separate water entities, potentially with other neighbouring local authorities. Others may decide to keep it in-house, and at this stage it's uncertain as to which way that might go. But the intention is to ensure that there's a level playing field so that all local authorities and all water entities can provide these products to their either ratepayers or to their customers. For that to happen, it will obviously require legislation, but the local authorities which are providing the joint and several guarantee will have to agree to the water entities being able to access it. then the water entities will also have to agree to make those products available.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Fraser and then Councillor Kippert.
Thank you, Chair. I look at it in a simplistic way, gentlemen. You're saying it's off balance sheet, but we will have to carry the bad debt, would we not?
I guess there's two things there. It's off balance sheets in the sense that it won't form, contribute to the calculation of your debt ratios. So it will be in a separate entity. The likelihood of there being a bad debt is very low because of the security ranking. The RAS levy will rank equally with a rates charge. If there's, whatever reason, a shortfall and the levy's not paid, then the ultimate recourse, which is the same as what local authorities have, is to sell the property and to take repayment through the sale proceeds. The RAS ranks ahead of first mortgage, so it should always be repaid. The only situation really where the RAS won't be repaid is if the value of the property's gone to zero. And that would have to happen on quite a systematic basis for the RAS to actually get into trouble. It's got a capital structure with equity to protect it from ever being in a situation where the shareholders are then asked for support. But that is, you're ultimately correct in the sense that there's a joint and several guarantee. So if everything went bad, and we just really can't see how that can possibly happen given the security structure, then there would be a call under the joint and several guarantee, and that would be in proportion to each council's ratepayers' use of the RAS. So for Gore, if Gore's ratepayers represent 1% of the loans, then Gore would have to step up with 1% of whatever that call was.
Councillor Kippert, then Councillor McPhail.
Thank you. I just want confirmation that there is no cost to the council to join, apart from perhaps a little bit of staff administration time.
There's no membership fee as such, but there will be, firstly, I guess, potentially sort of establishment costs to join, and then there may be some limited ongoing costs. So the establishment costs would be, we talked yesterday about the requirement to support RAS to originate loans, and that would involve having pages on council's websites for each of the products themselves. So we'd envisage that as part of the process of establishment, the RAS would provide all the information that the council would need to put on their websites, and then it would be up to the councils to effectively create those web pages to make that available. There will be a requirement for sharing of information from each council, so that would be in relation to specific ratepayer information and also property related information in terms of valuation. And then I guess there'll be sort of an ongoing requirement for information sharing. So there will be some upfront costs, and then there'll be some limited ongoing costs. But the intention of the RAS is to be a national shared service where it undertakes all the administration of the loans. So once the loan's been approved, council should be largely or completely out of the loop. It becomes a relationship between the RAS and the ratepayer to get repaid. And the RAS will be invoicing the ratepayer directly and having all the interactions with the ratepayer rather than going via the council.
Okay, and earlier you said that this all started because of the demand coming out of the Auckland City Council. So locally, do we know, has there been any requests for any demand locally for rate deferrals in Gore?
Rate postponements?
Through your worship, we have had the odd inquiry, particularly from people who have forestry blocks. So what maybe hasn't been made as clear as it could have been with this is the council receives all the money up front for the rates, so we are not out of pocket. So that's what it means by off balance sheet. And as far as establishment costs go, we actually have an opportunity to get in on the ground and be a shareholder and receive dividends in time, if that is what happens. So there's actually an opportunity to diversify the council's income and get another income stream coming through. So I just thought I'd like to make that point while I had the opportunity. But we do get queries every now and then from people who put payment plans in place. This would actually could help some of those people as well. So we do get a lot of queries, but we don't have the policies in place to help them as such at this point in time. This scheme would help that.
Thank you, Lorna. Councillor McFarlane.
Can I just add on the rates postponement? Uptake in New Zealand is very low, and we think it's a combination of factors. I think culturally, older New Zealanders don't want to spend all their lives paying off their mortgages only to remortgage themselves at a later date. But you can see with the way the sort of impost on ratepayers is increasing, that there's definitely a move towards ratepayers using their the equity in their homes to actually fund their lifestyles, and that's been seen through reverse mortgages in particular. The problem with reverse mortgages, they're incredibly expensive on an interest rate basis, but also in terms of fees up front. So that's, I guess, dampening down the uptake of reverse mortgages. I think the other factor has been that local authorities have been loath to promote rates postponement because they don't have the systems in place to process the applications and then the ongoing administration of those, what are effectively loans, and it does use up balance sheet capacity. So the concern for Auckland Council was that if rates postponement was to take off, that it would just soak up sort of debt capacity, which they couldn't use for other things. And what we have based a lot of the assumptions on in the financial modelling is an example in British Columbia, which has a property tax deferral scheme, which is the same as our rates postponement type scheme that we're proposing. And the uptake there is really high. So there's around 3 billion in outstanding loans. I think at last count there was around 90,000 users across 5 million, population of 5 million, which is very similar to New Zealand. And we would expect that New Zealand, given that New Zealand's facing the same demographic shift that British Columbia has already experienced, over time you'll get a big shift and a big move towards rate postponement.
And can I also just add then, there's also the benefits of removing a barrier to housing development. So this would mean that property developers don't need to find that capital up front. And it doesn't mean that that's then a hole on the council's balance sheet. So they'd be able to use this. And as I mentioned before, ratepayers benefit because they'd actually be paying a cheaper interest rate on that development contribution component. And then also terms of things like property improvement loans, the impact loans. So solar is just one of those examples. The modelling we've done with Rewire Aotearoa would indicate that we'd be able to double the number of solar installations over the next 15 years. I think it's something like 77,000 installations. So obviously that's across the country. But the research is that it's financing that is the biggest barrier to that uptake, but that actually does reduce people's power bills. And so it's net positive in that sense. And then just adding to that, we also are aware that there are potentially local issues that you might want to solve through this process. So some of the councils we've spoken to, they often have a drought during the hot summer months. And they have water bans. So this might be able to, potentially enable water capture and water storage locally. So there are categories that you could potentially put up through the RAS. The shareholders would have to approve, government would have to approve, but it could be a category that's specific to your region, as well as obviously categories of property improvement loans that have a public benefit right across the country as well.
Councillor Bruce.
Has central government not directed councils to stick to the basics? Becoming financial, whatever you want to call it, isn't really sticking to the basics.
So yes, obviously they are in the process of reviewing the core services. That is current government policy. I think this does support a couple of core services. So potentially they've got driving housing growth. and so the development contributions fits nicely into that in my mind. Obviously rates and the payment of rates I think is core services, so it does support that as well. And then I think there are other connections to government strategy. For example, just energy resilience. We're obviously facing, some fuel supply issues at the moment. So potentially things like the RAS that speeds up installation of solar batteries, etc., potentially improves and supports, future resilience. So I think there are a number of linkages to core services.
Thank you. Councillor Gardon.
Just a question on what percentage of the house value would they lend to? And the second question would be with the guarantee, our percentage would be based on how much money we've borrowed over the district. Is the risk for us low, but the risk for cities like Wellington and probably some of the Hawke's Bays, like we saw for the storms, flooding, when that could cause a draw on the guarantee? Would that be right? An earthquake or a flood event?
So on the first question, the current criteria that has been agreed with the steering group is that there must be 20% equity in the property after the RAS loan has been effectively written. So at all times there needs to be that 20% buffer in place. So that does provide some comfort that if there was a full sale of the property, that there'll be sufficient proceeds available, but also noting that the RAS does rank ahead of any other creditor, so it will always get its money out first. So the value of the property needs to be less than the loan to the RAS before the RAS won't get fully repaid. Essentially you'll point around some event that affects the value of properties as the key risk to the RAS. So I think on an individual property basis, the RAS exposure will be geographically diversified across a lot of different properties across New Zealand. So the risk of individual property owners not paying their levy is, the consequences of that are low. What is probably the biggest risk would be some major event that impacts a whole lot of properties' values to the point where those properties are worth nothing. And the best example would be what happened with Christchurch in the earthquakes. And, when they were, basically whole suburbs were red stickered. So that's the key concern. In those situations, there was compensation paid, though. So, that should also be able to be accessed to ensure that RAS gets repaid.
Thank you. Any further questions from councillors around the table?
Yeah, just a really quick one, just clarifying, I think what Lorne was touching on as well, just around there will be shareholding and non-shareholding councils, very similar to the LGFA?
Yes, correct. So at the moment, we've had about 8 councils put in funding to do the development phase. When we move forward to stand this up, their funding will convert into equity, into shareholding. At this point in time, we're wanting to be able to talk to the government and identify other councils that are supportive of the RAS. So at the moment, we are asking for an in-principle agreement that you support the RAS. At the moment, we are not asking for you to make any decisions on potentially becoming shareholders. At that point where we move to establish the RAS, we will then do a call out across the sector and we will need to raise the required funds to effectively stand the RAS up and then to operate the RAS for what we've modelled as about 4 to 5 years till we break even. So there will be an opportunity for people to then come into shareholders, but that is a separate decision and we're not asking you at the moment to consider financing the RAS at any stage at this point in time. There will be a second opportunity to do that. But it is just like the funding agency. There is the opportunity for people to not be shareholders, but still enable access to ratepayers. So your ratepayers would still get the benefits if you weren't a shareholder, but you wouldn't obviously then have decision rights over policy, future direction of the RAS, and obviously wouldn't potentially get a dividend if one was paid. That said, if we are at that point where we're looking to establish the RAS and we don't raise the required funds, then obviously we can't move forward to stand the RAS up.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser, and then Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Chair. That last comment of yours actually clarified a lot in my head. Thank you very much. Because the most important word I see in this whole thing is assuming. Have you got cross-party agreement on this inside Parliament, or has it not actually been presented yet properly?
Yeah, we've actually socialised it with, I think, just about every party, and we've had positive support from each parties. In fact, the Greens were talking about it quite openly over the weekend and again on the radio on Monday, but we have spoken to Labour. We're obviously working with National at the moment. I mean, the reason we actually spearheaded the development of the full and comprehensive business case in about August last year was the Minister wrote to us expressing interest and wanting us to do that final piece of work so we could then, so the government could then obviously do its due diligence and take it into consideration. So we do have broad cross-party support at this point. I guess that's not formal support. They haven't put it into policy or put it onto manifestos, but certainly the support is very clear.
And supplementary to that, just to clarify for me, you can be a shareholding or a non-shareholding council, but a shareholding council will have more control and access to the funds. And what would be the cap of funds be?
There'll be no difference in the availability of the products to shareholders and non-shareholders. And there's the way the capital structure is set up, the RAS should be able to meet any level of demand, because we get initial equity from councils and LGFA and central government, and then to grow the equity base, LGFA has agreed to subscribe for preference shares, so that as every loan is written, 5% of that will be effectively funded by the LGFA. So, you know, we've got modelling which suggests an expected outcome. We're sort of quietly hopeful that we'll exceed the base case and we'll have no problems meeting that demand if we do.
Hello, gentlemen. Just some clarification. If the funding isn't there from councils, will this or could this become a publicly funded entity? In other words, could big business buy into it?
We've actually had a couple of conversations around that, and there was some interest expressed a while ago. I don't think that is the ideal opportunity, because we want this to be a public benefit. And so I think while it's held, just like the funding agency, if it's owned by councils and government, then at its core it is a public benefit entity. And I think that is the driver here, is the public benefit is ratepayers actually benefit from this. So while there is potentially, I guess, the opportunity to turn it into a more of a commercial model, I think that would erode the public benefit.
Yeah, I think it would create sort of conflicts with the objectives of the scheme. You know, private money wants a return and they want to maximise returns, whereas this hasn't been set up with a view to maximise returns. It needs to make a surplus so that it's not going back to councils and asking for more money on a regular basis. But once it starts making a surplus, it'll be a decision for the shareholders, for the RAS board to decide whether it increases returns to shareholders or it reduces interest rates for ratepayers, or what it does with that money. And I guess the other thing to note is the way the RAS is structured, given the proximity to local government and to central government, it actually can get a higher credit rating than banks. If it becomes a private entity, it's just another bank in the mix of multiple banks. So it's been designed to be a local government-led entity, and we just don't think it'll stack up as a private entity.
Question from Councillor Gardine.
Just going back to the shareholders and non-shareholders, would a non-shareholder would not be a guarantee? And if you're not a guarantee, would that mean, like the LGFA, if you're a non-shareholder, you pay more interest?
All local authorities that make RAS products available will have to join the joint and several guarantee. So that will be separate from being a shareholder. being a shareholder, as Scott said, it gives the local authority sort of decision rights on firstly the establishment of the RAS and then subsequently on the operations of the RAS. There'll be a shareholder council in the same way that LGFA has a shareholder council, and that will be populated by representatives from from a group of shareholders, which sort of changes over time. But then there's the financial returns. So the modelling that we've done indicates that once RAS has reached break even, all the sort of margin surplus just drops to the bottom line, and that can provide a really healthy return to shareholders. So LGFA provides returns to local authorities through low margins, but the shareholders have benefited from a 5.6% cash return year on year in the 15 years that it's been operating, and the book value of the equity has quadrupled in that time. We think RAS, based on the modelling we've done, can provide a significantly better return than what LGFA has provided. And it's a shame that Mark Butcher's not here, because he'll quite openly say that that's one of the key things that's attracted LGFA to it. They see it as a, potentially a really good contributor to LGFA over time, and it's really building on what LGFA does and providing real benefits to ratepayers, but also providing real benefits to local authorities as shareholders as well.
Councillor Phillips.
Hopefully this will be one last question. Your shareholders, do they have one vote per council, or is it going to be based on population base?
Good question. We haven't. My LGFA, it's one vote per council. So it's not population based.
Thank you, gentlemen, for answering all those questions. If the councillors around the table are happy, I'd like to split the recommendation. We'll have A and B and then do C separately. So can I please get a mover for A and B? Councillor Fraser, and a seconder, Councillor Smith. We'll have some debate on that. Open the floor up for that. Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Councillor Coates. I've got two statements to make about this. Cheap credit is a risk. Just look where that got us in the last global financial crisis. Credit is usually lent on the provision that is going to drive growth within whatever environment it's put into. Basically, if you put your rates on hold, that credit that is coming from the LGFA is then going to the council. Now, the council is not there to make money at the end of the day. Like, you're effectively paying for your footpaths, your roads, your services. All that stuff doesn't generate income on the balance sheet. So I can see it sort of mixes that model up, whereas if you go to a bank and you're lending to a business, that business is taking that money and it's producing widgets of XYZ, which then develop further income into the community. The money coming in from the rates to the council, yes, it does go to contractors that then spreads that load throughout in the local community. The growth isn't at the end user at the end of the day. So if the ratepayer puts their rates on hold and that finance comes through to pay for it, the ratepayer isn't getting that benefit of the interest or the credit developing something for them. Now, to flip that on the head, and as I had this discussion with Hugo yesterday, is you also run the risk of cheap finance. The ratepayer could put their rates on hold, and I look at this like a mortgage. If I put my rates on hold for 30 years, and they're 2% below the current market, say it's on 5%, I went through and did the figures last night, and if I put my rates in every year into a compound interest I've got an aggressive fund of 10.2%, but I've worked out at 7. At the end of 30 years, after 55, so I think it says you can only start from 55 years plus, at the end of 30 years, you're $400,000 richer. So I could effectively go to them and say, right, I'm deferring my rates for the next 30 years, let them fund it. As long as I take that money that I'm putting into my rates every year and I put it into an active growth fund, I'm going to be $400,000 or just under $400,000 richer at the end of 30 years. Now, that still then allows me to go back and pay, like that's over and above paying back that LGFA loan. So I cannot see this ending well at all. Like any smart turkey that goes, cool, I'm just gonna, that property, and then offset it against that, can end up making a lot of money out of this. And I can see it coming down like a house of cards. Yes, it's all based on the value of the property at the end of the day, but for someone investing, this is money for nothing. Sorry, that's...
I guess maybe I can just respond to that. Ultimately, it's up to individual property owners to decide what they
Sorry,
do.
Hugo, I'm just going to have to shut you down there because we're actually in debate, not questions. Sorry. Maybe.
Thank you, Chair. I'd have to. I guess I'm a bit confused by Councillor's commentary of, are you against ratepayers having more money? Is that because that's kind of the argument you're making? Is that like if you want to put your investments into something else, I think that's a great thing. Is that if ratepayers can make money in different ways, then that's a good thing. I don't think ratepayers having more money is a bad thing.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm stating a balanced equation. Like, we run the risk of putting cheap credit into the economy. Okay, now, that drives inflation. I'm also worried about how the banks are going to react to this as well. But also, from an investor point of view, I see this as cheap credit where I can actually make an absolute killing off it because it's cheaper than me getting lending from the bank, and the bank won't allow me to take a loan to then invest into another finance institution, whereas I can lend against my house, lending against the LGFA, no risk to me, and then I can put it into another investment platform. So there's just some little caveats that have to be worked around this, I think, to close those loopholes.
Thank you, Councillor Stringer. Councillor McPhail.
Through the chair, there'll be a few flash Harrys around, I guess, Joe, but I'm thinking of the little old lady who saved her whole life to buy a house, worked away, and has got a freehold house, and got to the age of 75 or 80, can't afford her rates, and this is an option for her. And I think that's a great thing to be able to have that option. I know that the whole scheme's fantastic, but the thing is, it has been done overseas. And that model's there, so we can look at that model and work with it. So I think, in principle, I think it's a good idea. So there are bad sides to everything, I agree, and the inflation side, I think, could be an issue. But in principle, I think the idea's got merits.
Thank you, Councillor McPhail. Councillor Bruce.
I just got something little written out here. I don't support the proposal. I firmly believe it is a responsibility of council to ensure that rates are affordable for our community. The answer to high rates is not offering finance options or loans so people can manage payments while being charged interest. We should be addressing the cause of the problem, not adding to it. The scheme effectively asks ratepayers to take on debt, often with interest, just to meet their obligations. That is not a solution. It shifts the burden into the future, and some might say kicking the can down the road, and risks making financial pressure worse for those already struggling. We also need to recognise that there are better alternatives in place. Many banks offer interest-free or no-interest loans for things like healthy homes, insulation and heating, and double glazing. In addition to Warms Home Trust provides grants for insulation and heating, which we as a council already contribute to. This raises a question why we would support another layer of financing when we support things that already exist. If people cannot afford their rates now, the responsibility sits with us as a council to look inward at our own spending, our own priorities, and where costs can be reduced. Making home ownership more affordable and easing the burden on ratepayers should come from better financial discipline and cost control within councils, not by encouraging residents to borrow. We should focus on lowering costs and delivering core services efficiently, not creating mechanisms, can't say that word, that normalise debt as a way to cope with unaffordable rates. This is the ambulance at the bottom of the hill, and it's a pretty sad day when council was trying to support a scheme like this.
Thank you, Councillor Bruce. Councillor Cupit and then Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. Yes, along with, sorry, along the same lines, I'm not comfortable supporting this either. Asking ratepayers to get into debt to pay their rates if we haven't first exhausted every avenue to cut costs and reduce the rates in the first place. I also don't feel comfortable agreeing to something that hasn't been passed through legislation yet, and we're not actually aware of the establishment costs of it either. And I certainly wouldn't support us being a shareholder because I'm guessing that would have to be debt funded.
I came to the meeting yesterday pretty sceptical about the scheme, but I listened to Hugo with an open mind, and I ran it through. You could do what Councillor Stringer suggests, but I don't think 90% or 99% of people in their late 70s who I expect would take up the scheme, because listening to the ratepayers I was spoken to the other day, I spoke to a couple. They're fine paying their rates as long as there's two of them alive. They live in quite a nice house over West Gore. They said once one of them goes, they've got a problem meeting the rates bill, which is total rates are about $6,000 on this property. So they could definitely, because I know there's no on that, could use this scheme well for the last 5 or 6 years. And if people use it properly, I don't see any problem with this scheme. Now that I understand it better from listening to Hugo and asking questions yesterday, and as you'll know from my tone at the meeting yesterday, I was asking some pretty hard questions. So I'm more comfortable with it now, and I realise with anything there are going to be problems, and they're going to be what you call the smart guy who thinks of doing something like Councillor Stringer, but I think 99% of people will just play the game.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a wee comment, but then I'll move to Councillor Smith. A couple of scenarios for me personally that I can see this working really well for our ratepayers is our rates. We know what the projections are. We know how much debt there is. We know how much the increases need to be for the council to keep the books balanced. We know what the rates increases are going to be, and then we've got water on top of that. So the way we live our lives as Kiwis is potentially changing. Mum and Dad both have to go to work. Mum and Dad both still want to have kids. They need these kids to be looked after, and potentially with the impact loans, there's a scenario where you've got a quarter-acre section, there's room to put a granny flat out the back. You could borrow, say, $50,000, spread that cost over 30-odd years at a low interest rate, build a granny flat, Nana or Granddad can move in, built-in babysitters, which enables Mum and Dad to continue working and working the 40-hour week, which I know isn't the Kiwi dream, but it's the reality that we're facing at the moment. And another scenario with the rates deferral scheme, you've, like Councillor McDonald said, you've got an elderly couple, one of them is in a retirement home, you've got potentially a single person living on their own, paying all the costs for the upkeep of the house, the rates, the fuel, the heating. She could then potentially defer her rates for a number of years until it's not a very nice thing to talk about, but if she doesn't have any dependents, what has she got to lose by potentially deferring her rates and then it coming off the sale of her property? I think this is a good solution. It is a band-aid, like Councillor Bruce said. It's not the ideal world, but we're facing costs, and our ratepayers are facing costs that aren't sustainable, so I'm personally in favour of this scheme. Councillor Bruce? Smith, sorry.
So I'm in favour of this. I personally work in the lending space, and I see the people and their need around some of these sorts of products. Often when they are requiring a product like a reverse mortgage, they're not in a position to meet the strict criteria that a bank sets by for them to actually meet and get those funds. So this does, to me, cover one of the gaps in the market that exists. I think if we're looking at the intention of this, it is to offer options to ratepayers that don't currently exist or are too expensive. So that's a big thing for me. Against some of the comments around the table, it's not an we're going to do this and no longer look at reducing rates. We still have a job as council to keep doing that. So this isn't a if or not, it's a and. We should be doing this because it's an and it's another option for our ratepayers.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. To be honest, I was sceptical about this when I read through, and I could not get there yesterday, gentlemen, to listen to your talk. Unfortunately, my other job took over. Listening to you today has actually given me an insight into what's going on. This isn't guaranteed. This still has to go to government. There's no guarantee. I've listened to what other people are saying around here about our job as councillors, and that is our job as councillors. And I totally agree with Councillor Smith. This is another option for our ratepayers. I'm personally dealing with somebody at the moment who's dealing with a reverse mortgage, and the only person who's going to make money out of that is the bank. We have an ageing population, and one of the reports we've got there, over 16% of our population is over 60. And a lot of that population rely on one income. And if we can make it somewhat easier for them, then I support this.
Thank you, Mabel.
Thank you. I think it's starting to have been said as I go around. I guess I'm a bit shocked by some of the commentary around the table. Like, this is, I've been a big fan of this ever since I've heard about this in its infancy many years ago. And it just gives our ratepayers another option. You know, I go up to the likes of Parata every year when we have to put up the rates, and I always get hit with people on fixed incomes who are on the pension who come to me and say, what am I going to cut out? You know, I don't get any more money. But this ultimately gives them another option. I agree with what Councillor Coates said, it's not the ideal. But if you're in your 70s and in your 80s and you can put that against the property that you own and keep some equity in there, and the rates, you know, the interest rates that you have to acquire are really minimal, that gives them that extra $100 or $200 so they can actually pay for their groceries during the week. So it's an extra option. I don't think a whole lot of people are going to actually take that up, but the people who need it really can. I just wanted to add a really quick note as well, although we're not looking at contributing at this point at all, I do want to highlight that I think that us being a shareholder is a really good thing that we need to think about very carefully. As Councillor Fraser said, it's not set up yet, but I think if it does, then we need to consider that. You know, the LGFA, which we're not a shareholder council, we reap the benefits, but we're not a shareholder council, 5.6% per year. It's a large amount of revenue coming back to the council that we can actually then put back into our community. That's something that we don't get now. That is something, and they were saying that it could be higher with the RAS too. So I think it's something we really need to consider about being shareholders as well.
Thank you, Mabel. Councillor Bruce.
So really it's making money from people that are struggling.
Just in reply to that, if they're not borrowing from RAS, they're going to potentially be doing a reverse mortgage from the banks. So, maybe.
Yeah, happy to answer that. At the moment, if they have to take out a reverse mortgage or refinance any of their property, they are giving that money to the bank. If they need some help, this is a non-for-profit. It goes back into councils, back into the communities, back into the same people that they're helping. So it's not going off to an overseas bank that then spends it wherever.
Thank you. Yep. Okay, so I have a mover and a seconder. I'm going to put the motion on the table.
Can I just make one point of clarification on the shareholding question? Just that I answered before. I just want to be clear that there's one share per vote. It's not a population-based equity arrangement. You know, you don't get your votes based on how big your ratepayer base is. It's based on how many shares you own in the RAS. In the LGFA.
Thank you, Hugo. Back to this. We have the motion for A and B recommendation on the table. We've got a mover and a seconder. Oh, can I call for division? Yep. You good? Right. So, yeah. Thank you. That's passed with 10 to 2. And
Yeah,
we have to
now-
move the second one, eh?
Yeah, need to vote on option C.
Hey?
Vote on option C.
Okay, and do we have to have a move in a second though?
No, that was moved in second.
So motion C, can I have a mover? Or do you want to do a debate on C? I need a mover and a seconder first though. I need a mover and a move. Ben and Joe. And debate on are we doing questions on, do you want to do questions on C? Andy?
Thank you, Chair. My trouble with C is that it binds us to it, or would it come back to us to then look at the establishment and figure where we would go from there? Before we're making a decision here that yes, we'll sign up and join, but yeah, I want to see what that looks like first.
I can probably help answer that. Yes, this is more just the advocacy to get it set up, so to try and convince government to allow us to do this and to also contribute to the setup as well. There would be further communication from the team as to what the shareholding would look like, what more involvement from members. So this is just a more in principle, we support it, we would use it, please government make this accessible to everybody else. Does that make sense?
Oh, sorry, David.
Just to be totally clear, you could pull out at a later date. This is communicating your intent. At a later date, you would actually have a document to sign and you would need to pass another motion at that point to actually sign the document. So you could still pull out later.
Thank you. So that motion's on the table. Do I need to call a division? Any further debate? Motion on the table. Should we call a division? Division, please. Oh, I have done it. So that's carried 10 to 2. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming and answering all our questions. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Coates, for chairing that item and the previous one. I've got a couple of councillors moving their seats looking for a bathroom break. Do we think we can whip through the last three quickly and then we can break? Is that okay? Yep, let's do it. Right, 7.4, which is the triennial agreement for the Southland region. This has been bounced around quite a bit with the mayors. We finally came to a bit of an agreement around the mayoral forum table. I just did want to highlight one of the key changes was that we no longer have an independent person administering the mayoral forum. We had I think it was a 0.5 FTE in that role. Southland had offered to take that on as a function of the chair role and absorb that within them. I'll be transparent that I had concerns with that in terms of neutrality, making sure that the agenda for the mayoral forum isn't set by one council, is that it is worked on by all four councils that are involved in the mayoral forum. So there is a change in here that says that any agenda item requested by a local authority's mayor or chair will be included on the mayoral forum agenda. So that it helps, in my opinion, the neutrality a little bit. I personally think that we should have an independent resource, but I am happy to live with this, which is what we agreed to at the mayoral forum. Any questions on this document? Appear to be none. Could I have a mover that we receive a note and delegate the authority to myself and the Chief Executive to sign the agreement? Councillor Gardine, seconded by Councillor Paul McPhail. Any discussion? We'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That is carried. 7.5, the Gore District Council Code of Conduct List of Investigators. Debbie, did you want to speak to this at all?
The Code of Conduct itself just requires us to put together a list of investigators at the beginning of each traineum, so we're just putting that up. It just is a formality, really.
Thank you, Debbie. Any questions? Councillor Bruce?
Have any of these firms or individuals acted for the council on a regular basis?
Yes.
Typical that you would use regular lawyers that you engage with for your code of conduct matters. It was the same with last term as well. Councillor Gardine?
Is it the same as last time, people?
Sorry, can you repeat that question, please?
Is it the same people as last time? Last time it was the Code of Conduct, the old Code of Conduct?
I haven't seen the list from last traineum, but I know that we did use Anderson Lloyd for the last Code of Conduct investigation, so that one definitely is the same.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McDonald? Happy to move. Cool. Seconder, Councillor Fraser. Any further discussion? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That is carried. Thank you, councillors. That brings us to the end of the public agenda. I do want to make the conflicts of interest public, though, so that members of the public know who will be in which appeal process as well. So we'll just deal with that quickly. So I'll be declaring a conflict for the Waikaika Gold Mine. Councillor Gardine.
I have a conflict for Waikaika Gold too.
I have a conflict with Waikaika Gold too.
I have a conflict with Waikaika Gold and the district plan, so I'll remove myself from the room for the in committee.
And I have a conflict for the district plan appeals due to my work with Groundswell.
Thank you, councillors. All happy with that, and we'll just exit the room for those individual pieces. I'll move from the chair that we move into public exclusive for those two items that have just been mentioned. Can I please have a seconder? Councillor Phillips. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That is carried, and we will have a quick intermission for toilet. Thank you.